This podcast deals with issues about LGBT families and trans-specific topics. We would love to hear from you and welcome your questions and comments. However, we will not tolerate any discriminatory language or hate speech. So please, just don't do it. Enjoy the show.
To be honest, that's where a lot of things
Fall apart.
get rocky.
Yeah.
You know, because you assume that you know everything that's happening with somebody.
That happens with a lot of marriages where people just get silent and
I think it's normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's normal to fall into that kind of complacency. Like, I know this person, I know, everything in our life is ordered and we know what is what, so we don't have to have a conversation every day about that's just what happens.
Right.
When we were kids, we met at camp.
After college, we got married.
10 years later, we finally had a baby.
That same year, I came out as trans.
This is the story of our journey.
Through marriage,
Parenting,
gender,
and all the changes that life brings.
this is Our Life in Transition. That's not going to help us at all.
Testing.
Are you testing me? Am I testing you? Who's being tested?
You're always testing me.
I know. Okay. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'm Shannon,
And I am Rachel.
and you are listening to another delightful episode of Our Life in Transition.
This is true. It's going to be delightful.
I think this one is going to be a little less intense than last week, I think.
Maybe, but there might be more fighting.
I hope not. I don't want to fight.
Well, because today we're talking about communication. And let me just put a disclaimer out there right away. We don't know what we're talking about. No, okay. It's kind of we're not experts. We're just talking from a perspective of a couple who hasn't killed each other in 18 years.
20 years.
20 years. Okay. See, I don't even know. But we haven't killed each other yet, so maybe we know a little bit about this.
We're
We're
ahead of
going
the
to
curve.
share what we know
Yeah, exactly.
with you and what we think about communication with you.
Yeah, which we don't always communicate well, but those who can do teach. So we're going to tell you what you need to do.
It's a horrible thing to say, by the way. That's really hurtful to teachers. Because teachers can do. I'm sorry, teachers. She knows not what she says. So why should we talk about communication? I mean, it kind of seems self-explanatory. It kind of, everybody does it.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't communicate with other people and speak your mind, and you're not going to get very far in any kind of relationship, personal or otherwise.
But communication is not just speaking your mind. There's a lot of non-verbal things that go into communication, too.
Well, yeah, that's true.
But the reason we're talking about it is because it's literally the basis of every relationship ever. Whether it's non-verbal or very clearly verbal, every relationship, even your relationship with yourself, is based on communication. Because all those little things that you say in your head to yourself is communication.
And as a trans person, I can tell you, it's sometimes you communicate to yourself in ways that are not healthy.
And sometimes it's abuse.
Yeah, sometimes
but
it's
it's still communication.
Yeah, that's true. I think I'm getting better at communicating. I'm one of those people that, especially verbal communication, I'm not the best at because I'm generally a shy person. I'm much more talkative and much more lively when there's a microphone in front of my face instead of an actual person.
Are you saying I'm not an actual person? Would you like to rephrase?
I was not communicating that.
I kind of feel like you were.
Uh, Words fail me. No.
Always.
Yeah, no. You are a person, but we've been together for 20 years, so we're like...
You just assume we are one?
We are one, yeah, we're one person.
Okay, all right.
No, but, you know, this comes to mind because of, you know, you actually went, you talked to one of my coworkers recently, and she was all excited because she got me talking, and I am not a naturally talkative person. I'm very shy, and
Except at home where she won't shut up.
yeah, well, I'm shy and I'm soft-spoken and I'm quiet until you get me going. Once I'm comfortable with you, you can't get me to shut the fuck up. So
Believe me, I've tried. So everybody goes through life with all these different relationships, and you know, you communicate differently depending on where you are and who you're communicating with and stuff like that. But this podcast is not focused on everything. We're focused on family and marriage and relationships in that respect, and parenting and things like that. So the importance of communication in these areas is where we're going to focus. And family, we could talk about family, but family is tricky.
yeah,
Because family communication is a inherited thing.
yes,
I mean, so over generations, like how different families communicate, kind of, you know, evolves, and so how you learn to communicate first is based on what you see around you growing up in your specific family setting. Example of this, I think it's fair to say, you know, without really, you know, calling out my family or anything like that, honestly, my family doesn't talk about things. We're kind of the, you know...
stoic.
No, because stoic is different. We're kind of, let's stick our head in the sand and pretend like things aren't happening type of people. And if we have hurt feelings, or if we have a problem with somebody, we just, you know, we just don't talk about it. We don't deal with it. You know, we're not the frank, open, you know, boisterous kind of family. I mean, except when there's alcohol involved, but we don't need to talk about that. So we're not... I was raised in a very, let's avoid talking about anything unpleasant kind of situation.
And if it does come up, it's kind of passive?
Passive-aggressive.
Yeah. Or conversely, I'm, you know, with some exceptions in my family, and my mom kind of led the charge on this, we talk about everything.
Everything.
We're up in your face, or we're up in your business.
Everything. All the time.
And,
which is very jarring when you come from my background into, that kind of a family situation. Jarring, I think, is about the nicest thing I can say. Jarring, alarming, terrifying, unsettling, uncomfortable. What the hell is going on here? That would be my impression of, you know, when I actually started being around Shannon's family. And for somebody who is anxiety-ridden, introverted, used to not talking a lot in family situations, it was an entirely different universe. And conversely, because I was like that, everybody in your family thought I was an alien.
Yeah, people... The one big thing that we have, especially in my parents' house, was, like, everybody would go and stand in the kitchen and chat and, like, snack on things and just be in there, and you're like, what the fuck is everybody doing? I'm just going to sit here on the sofa and be quiet, and I don't understand what's going on. And then you're like, why is nobody coming out here and sitting with me? And everybody's going, why is she not coming in here and talking with us? Because you just didn't understand the dynamic, and it took a long time for us to kind of get past that, and us to communicate what was going on, and me to explain to you how they worked, and you to try to get us to understand how you worked.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely a learning curve. But so your first introduction to communication is always your family.
Absolutely.
And that kind of shapes your personality and your how you learn to communicate and how you set boundaries and things like that. Communication in your family basically shapes everything. I've learned this through therapy. Don't laugh, so have you.
Yeah, I know. It's just the way you said it. And it can be really hard, especially with family, to kind of set boundaries or open up boundaries and kind of set expectations. And here's the dog again trying to communicate to us that she needs to be part of the podcast. Seriously.
Okay, speaking of boundaries.
None.
Go.
Scram. We love you. You're cute. You're annoying.
Anyway.
She's
gonna be okay if we just keep a hand here.
But it can be very difficult sometimes when you're trying to change an established dynamic.
Right, and like changing an established dynamic, like having a, like blending a family.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you coming into my family.
Right.
Me interacting with your family is an upheaval.
Yeah.
Especially because we come from such opposite backgrounds.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like, as you were saying how, your family is kind of doesn't necessarily talk as openly about feelings and things like that. And
anything.
And I'm very just blunt, and if you piss me off, I'm going to let you know.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, which is...
I'm just being honest. I'm just talking and like, why don't you understand? I'm explaining how I feel.
Right, but to me, or to my family, that comes off as you being a monster.
Yeah.
Because only a monster would actually openly speak about things like that. And at the same time, me going into your family, everybody thinks that I'm antisocial and that I don't want to interact with anybody.
Right.
And I'm just like a miserable like lump because like that's not how your family interacts. So trying to break down that kind of way of being is not always easy. It's not easy for me to put up boundaries with your family,
right,
without seeming like a jerk.
And it's more off-putting when I put up boundaries with my family, because they're like, well, what are you doing? This isn't how you interact with us. I mean, it's one thing when you do it, because then you're the antisocial alien. Where when I do it, it's like, well, why are you being like this now? I'm like, well, no, because you're overstepping. And at the same time, with your family, like when you try to be more honest, they're like, what the hell are you doing? How dare you talk to us this way?
Right. So, okay, so you have family dynamics, and family dynamics are not easy to change. Mm-hmm. And family dynamics, to an extent, in order to change them, you have to work within the family, and it's a very gradual thing.
Yes.
And in some cases, like, it's just not going to change, and you have to kind of...
You got to find middle ground.
Play by their rules-ish in order to, you have to subvert from the inside.
It's almost like code switching. Like, where in one situation you kind of, talk.
It's exactly code switching.
Yeah, it is. You talk and you act one way in one situation, and then another you completely flip things around and act and talk in a completely different way.
Yeah. And it's exactly like that. And, the best thing I can say about that is your family, and they're going to be that way. But you, when you have your own family, get to establish a different mode of being. So, there's hope. Anyway.
I've had some people comment, some of our friends comment after they've listened to some of the episodes of the podcast, Because being that we come from such different family dynamics and communication styles, and even individually we have different communication styles. Sometimes like how we interact is a mystery to people. And I think that
It's a mystery to us sometimes too.
And I think that us doing this podcast has actually kind of illustrated that a little bit, where
It's a window into our private lives.
I think that sounded much creepier than you were intending.
No, it's meant to be creepy. Like, creepers are, like, in our lives now. Alright. I might have had too much coffee this morning.
Wait, how much coffee have you had?
Well, I'm halfway through this large cold brew. And, I had 2 cups before that.
Oh, I thought you just had one before.
No, 2.
Oh, so you're on like, oh God. Wait, you got a cold brew too?
I did.
Did oh.
Mine's French vanilla, though.
But still, I finally converted you to the cold brew.
Anyway.
Way
off track. Mm-hmm. Way off track.
Which is our communication style.
Anyway.
Just go off somewhere else.
So creepers can now see into our lives and how we communicate with each other.
Exactly.
Moving along.
Yeah.
Which leads us to marriage and communication within
just like
our relationship.
You called our entire audience a bunch of creepers. We love you. Please don't leave.
Well, creeper is not in a bad way, but in that you're kind of like looking in on our relationship.
Yeah.
You know, I like to creep on, in that kind of way too. I like to see into other people's lives, It's like pressing your face against a window. Okay, this is not getting less creepy. So,
just taking that all deeper. Like, what the hell is happening? Ow. Oh, it hurts. Okay,
so marriage.
Yeah.
So in our marriage,
yeah,
there's different things to communicate about.
Yeah.
Because we have to communicate on this, level of dealing with your transition because, we couldn't just have a normal marriage because you had to go and...
There's no such thing as normal
Fair
marriage.
enough. Anywho.
I made things interesting.
So, yeah. So, I mean...
And honestly, as far as...
It's all about communication.
Yeah, as far as communicating things, that maybe dealing with the baby is up there, maybe dealing with bills and finances and how stuff is up there, but like that's probably like the biggest thing that was a challenge as far as communicating, because it was as open and honest as we are with each other. That was the hardest thing for me to actually open up about and talk to you about, and it was very much not easy to do.
But I think that going through this whole, process has helped our communication.
It has.
Because I think before transition, before you started transitioning, we'd been married for 10 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Before we started talking about it, yes. You knew what was going on a while before everybody else, so yes. Yeah.
But so for 10 years. So we had this 10 years of, comfort.
Right.
In our, and you kind of start to take for granted that you know what's going on with the other person.
Right.
You don't need to talk about it because you know that other person, you know what's going on, you know how they're feeling and transition kind of turned all of that on its head and made it, I really don't know. I don't know what's going on with you.
Although, to be fair, I think we do communicate well enough that before I opened up and really expressed what was going on, for a long time you were like, something is wrong with you.
Yeah, well, yes,
something's wrong.
I knew something was not right, but I didn't know what. I knew that something was bothering you.
Right. I was just thinking that too. I'm like, let's clarify. Me being trans is not something wrong.
So, anyway, but so you kind of take for granted that, you know the person, you don't have to communicate
Right.
what's going on in your head, and to be honest, that's where a lot of things
Fall apart.
get rocky.
Yeah.
You know, because you assume that you know everything that's happening with somebody.
That happens with a lot of marriages where people just get silent
and I think it's normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's normal to fall into that kind of complacency. Like, I know this person, I know, everything in our life is ordered, and we know what is what, so we don't have to have a conversation every day about that's just what happens.
Right.
In every marriage.
It becomes just a routine.
Becomes a routine
Mm-hmm.
and everything. So, transition kind of screwed that all up. and now we communicate, which is good. We don't always communicate well.
True. And I mean, I think that in having to be honest about myself and be honest about what's going on with me, and you having questions, me having to explain things, us figuring out how to deal with my transition together, us dealing with how to communicate to the rest of the world what is going on, A, with me being trans, and B, with you not running for the hills like you were expected to do. I think it has forced us to be to work to be on the same page about things in a way that we hadn't before.
And in a way, I think it's a little uncomfortable for both of us, because even, we have a good relationship and we, do try to communicate, but both of us are introverted people.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't know it from the podcast, but I tell you on my behalf, it's all because of coffee and alcohol.
I'm sorry, you're holding out alcohol on me?
No, well, when we were doing the podcast, when we were recording the podcast at night, it's a little early. It's only,
that's true.
We're recording at 10:30 a.m. I have not broken out the beer yet. But when we record at 4 or 5 or 6 o'clock, there's beer or wine with me. So
That's true. That's true. I forgot.
I mean, okay, I feel like I should put a disclaimer here. You shouldn't use substances to make it easier to communicate.
Yes. Like, I'm a boring, horrible, non-communicative person unless you ply me with drugs.
Okay.
That's...
It,
Yeah, okay. That was poorly communicated. That's not what she meant.
Right. Anywho. No, but we are both very introverted people by nature. And we spend a lot of time, inside our own heads. So even communicating with each other is often a challenge. Even little stuff like managing the household, paying bills and, talking about finance, which nobody likes to talk about finance. Chores, things like that, like, we're in our own heads about. And some of it is a personality
True.
style. I'm in my own head because I'm constantly making lists and, figuring things out, and then giving myself panic attacks because I've made an insurmountable list that I haven't communicated to anybody else that I have to handle all on my own. And then panic ensues, and then nothing gets done because all I end up doing is staring at the wall, having, hyperventilating.
And meanwhile, I'm just blissfully unaware of what's going on, and you're having like a panic attack, and suddenly, like, you start freaking out. I'm like, whoa, what the hell is this? What happened?
Right.
For years, I didn't quite comprehend it until I understood a little bit more about how your brain works. And, now that I understand when you start getting, like, upset about, like, all the stuff around the house, I'm like, yeah, whoa. We can do this together. You don't have to take everything on yourself. It's going to be okay. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work.
But also, like, my mode of communication when we do, like, sit down and deal with, like, household stuff is very much not the way you would prefer to communicate, because I communicate as a, let's have a business meeting. I call this meeting to order. Let's talk about the bills. Let's talk about the chores. Let's talk about the, schedule for the next week. And you're very much like I don't want to have a business meeting type of person.
Well, I don't mind having a business meeting if I know I'm going to have a business meeting, but, if I'm...
We have pop-up surprise business meetings.
It's like a pop quiz. It's, if, it's 7:30 in the morning and I'm still trying to wake up and then, like, you woke up, you're also a morning person. I am not a morning person. So, like, you wake up and then, like, have like this.
I'm immediately off and running.
Your insurmountable list ready to go. It's like very detailed, and I'm like, what's going on? Who? What is my name? Which, I mean.
Well, if you didn't change it all the time, maybe you'd know it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was going to say that, but you beat
Zing.
me to it. It's
the coffee.
Yeah, it's coffee. But yeah, I mean, I was going to make that joke, but sometimes we think the same, which is actually kind of getting scary, that we've been together so long that sometimes, like, one of us will say what the other one's thinking. But, I mean, as far as... I'm
inside your head.
Again, there you go, being creepy. But, I mean, I'm more of a person that is inclined to deal with, one thing at a time. And, I just kind of look at the problem that's in front of me at the moment, deal with that problem, then I'm done, and I move on.
I'm more the type of person that assumes everything is on fire and runs around screaming. No, my general state of being is panic. I live in panic.
Fair enough. Anxiety's a bitch. But
anyway.
And to that end, I mean, there's
going to be so much editing.
Oh, yeah. All the time. I mean, to that end, you have to understand how the other person functions so that you can be supportive. Because when you start getting panicky, I have to know, okay, what's going on? Why are you upset? And that takes time to learn. For a long time, like, we really, like, didn't comprehend how the other one was functioning.
Which makes it difficult to provide emotional support.
Exactly. So, I mean, like, when you're, like, panicking because you have a giant list of things, I can be like, okay, calm down, come here, let me hug you, it's going to be okay, let's figure out how to work through this list together. And vice versa. I mean, I think sometimes I can get a little, not lost in the weeds, but I can get, like, a little too focused on just one thing, and then I don't necessarily...
This is being recorded, If you admit that now, be prepared to forever have it thrown in your face.
But I'm the editor. I can delete whatever
I want. Anyway. Thanks again for listening to the show.
If you like what you hear so far, subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, be sure to share with your friends and family so they can enjoy as well.
This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. So then you add into all of this chaos and communication styles and all of this, a small human.
Oh my god.
Who has their own communication style now.
Yeah, and then opinions.
Oh my god, our barely 2-year-old has opinions.
Yeah.
She looks at me and says, I don't like this.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Who told her she could have opinions? But now she's communicating.
Yeah, having a child is like having, like, a bomb dropped in the middle of your house. It's
just in the middle of your life, not even your house.
True.
Just, like, in the middle of your life. It's amazing. I mean, sometimes it's a glitter bomb, but but then you have this whole thing where you have to communicate with them and set boundaries and all of that stuff while they're communicating with you about their likes and dislikes and opinions and all of that.
And sometimes their likes include grabbing things which they shouldn't be eating and trying to consume them.
Trying to kill themselves on a daily basis.
And, you know, communicating that, no, that's bad, don't do that. Or, no, don't jump on that thing, you will fall and hurt yourself.
Makes you a horrible human being.
Though, I think to be fair, I think we do a pretty good job of not panicking with a lot of things. You know, when she falls down, we don't like, oh my god, my baby's hurt. We're just like, boom, he fell down. And
so she doesn't make a big deal of this stuff.
Yeah. But it's difficult, especially when they're small and you can't necessarily explain things. I mean, you can try to explain things, but they can't conceptualize what you're talking about. It's difficult sometimes to set those boundaries in order to get them to behave, to not harm themselves, to
not harm anyone else.
Not harm anyone else.
Yeah, but there's also this whole, and I think that comes with as they become a, you know, more logically thinking human.
I know a lot of adults who are logically thinking humans, so we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, but they weren't raised by us.
Yes, exactly.
But then you also have to, you know, when you have a small human, you have to communicate with your partner.
Right.
About what your expectations are for your small human. How are you going to raise them? What values are you going to teach? How are you going to discipline? How, you know, things like that.
And that, I think, is the number one place where you have to be on the same page. With parenting, you have to kind of present a united front, because if you don't, then your children will play you off of each other. You
cannot cede power to the small humans. You cannot.
I'm not gonna lie, I was that child.
Right.
I very much was, which, I mean, so I know what to look for. But, you know, if you don't communicate, if you don't talk to each other and come to an understanding of where you need to be vis-a-vis your kids, then your kids can then turn around and kind of put a wedge between the two of you if you aren't on the same page.
Right. And you also have to think about when and where you're having these conversations. Mm-hmm. Because having the discussion about how you're going to do things with your child in front of your child is not necessarily the way to go about things either. You have to have those discussions, you know, before you're dealing with the issue, away, you know, from your child, so that you can present a united front. And they're not, because, okay, kids are smarter than we give them credit for.
It's so true.
They see things, they hear things, they absorb things. So even things like your family's communication style. Mm-hmm. Our communication style has already been instilled in our child.
Yes.
She already knows how we communicate, how we don't communicate, like all of those things. She's picked up those cues, and she's going to start to use them. So you need to, before you have kids, when your kids are really, really small, you know, like still tiny little sleeping pukers, you need to have an understanding of, you know, what kind of things you want for your family and what kind of things you don't want for your family. And have those honest conversations with your partner, because once you have a small human, you have to implement those things right away. You can't, like...
I can't do it on the fly.
Well, you can, but that's where problems come up.
Right.
Like, if you and your partner are not communicating how to discipline your child, and now you have a child and you disagree on everything.
Right.
And you're like, I fundamentally don't understand where you're coming from on this. Like, and you have that fundamental difference in parenting styles. Like, you have a serious problem that might turn out to be something that's insurmountable. So you need to be on the, same page, or or at least in the same chapter. And so you can get to the same page.
Right.
Or else, just chaos. Doom.
I do have to say, though, that although I am not happy that she has opinions now and wants to assert her own ideas about things, I do appreciate now that she is able to communicate to us and talk to us and express herself.
Yeah, it makes the guessing a lot easier, because at least you can guess what the word she's trying to say is, whereas before it was just a lot of grunts. And
are you hungry? Are you sleepy? Did you shit yourself? What's going on?
Yeah, pretty much. But okay, so talking to each other is really important, but we also have to acknowledge those non-verbal things. I'm really bad with this. Shannon is a huffer. I don't know if you know what that means, but...
It doesn't mean I huff things. That's not what she means.
But, no,
I sigh a lot.
Shannon's normal state of being is to, all the time, constantly, to be going...
And it's not that I'm, upset about something, but I do it when I'm thinking. I do it when I'm bending down to pick something up. I do it, I do it a lot.
All the time. And in my brain, I am hardwired, partly because of the way my family communicates, and some other things. I am hardwired to believe that is a signal of displeasure. Mm-hmm. So I'm constantly going, what? What's the matter? What happened? What'd I do? What's... Like our dog, the Chihuahua. Which drives Shannon insane.
Nothing, everything's fine.
Because literally every 5 seconds, she is huffing and I'm going, what? What happened? What?
Everything's fine. Nothing's wrong. I was just deciding what kind of snack I wanted to have. Don't panic. It has nothing to do with you.
At the same time, I have a tendency to do obnoxious things like roll my eyes.
I'm surprised you haven't broken them yet. You roll your eyes a lot.
And, well, look. All I'm saying is that you gotta pay attention to the vibes that you're putting off, the non-verbal. Oh my god, that guy with the freaking Corvette. You gotta pay attention to the non-verbal communication that you do as much as the verbal communication, because it's just as important, and people around you will pick up on it. And if you're not saying what you mean, people will draw their own conclusions based on context clues, like you're rolling your eyes, you're huffing, you're
not talking at all.
You're not talking at all.
You're being too quiet.
So, nonverbal communication is as important, sometimes more important, than the verbal communication, because I can say a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But if I say, oh, Shannon, I think you look great today, while I'm rolling my eyes, that doesn't mean what you think it means.
Liar.
So, I mean, all of it is important, and all of it has meaning.
And to be fair, I think both of us have had situations where we are not wanting to communicate something, or we're not ready to talk about something, but our nonverbal communication has
already started the conversation.
And I think very much when you're overwhelmed by something, I can tell before you say what's bothering you. And sometimes I'm a little annoying with what's bothering you. I know something's wrong, and you're like, leave me alone, nothing's wrong, and then they're like, I'm so overwhelmed. But and the same thing, we were talking, a couple minutes ago about the you knew something was wrong with me before I opened up about being trans. That
there's nothing wrong with you.
There was something bothering me before I opened up about being trans.
Yes.
And you kept asking me, what's the matter? What's going on? You're acting different. And you were able to pick up on that before I even really was able to wrap my head around it. And I think that, we were talking before about families can be passive aggressive. It's one of those things where, if you are not communicating verbally, sometimes your nonverbal communication can come across, as being passive aggressive. Sometimes if you are communicating verbally, the same thing.
Yeah, and this goes along with the disclaimer that I said at the beginning. We are not perfect. We do not always do everything the right way. There are, and communication has pitfalls. You fall into old habits. Everybody does terrible stuff to people, even when they love them, because you're not paying attention. And one of the things that I have learned in therapy, and just in, life with Shannon, is that you have to pay attention.
Right.
So, am I passive aggressive? Often. Because it's a habit that I have, and when I'm not paying attention, and when I'm in my own head, things come out the wrong way, or don't come out at all, and yes, it happens. The other thing that, I think that I'm famous for, because of my anxiety, is not saying anything and not saying anything and not saying anything, and letting things build up and build up and build up, and then at some point, boom.
Yeah.
I explode, and then I assume that I think the first thing that's always out of my mouth is, like, you should have figured this out. Like, some form of that. It's like, well, clearly I'm overwhelmed and everything is going wrong, and, like, life is horrible.
And sometimes I pick up on those things beforehand. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I pick up on them, and then you're not ready to talk about them until you are, and you blow.
Right, and you can't always be focused on what the other person is, dealing with. Sometimes you're focused on what you're dealing with. But so I have a strong tendency to do that, or you do these little things because things are building up and building up and building up and building up. I let out these little bursts of anger or nastiness or stuff as a release valve so that I don't explode. And it's just as terrible as an explosion. Like,
and you're not alone in that. I mean, I do the same thing too. And
like I said, being recorded for posterity. As much as you edit, I'll still have the raw version.
And I think everybody has points where they're not communicating that something is bothering them, and so then when they find something that's very obvious to be bothered about, they'll funnel all of their frustration about everything else into that
little thing.
Yeah. And I think I usually wind up doing that about, like, stuff around the house. But I mean, it's and then that can lead to, like, a kind of, not even a cold war, but just like a one-upping each other, and like a tit for tat, where, like, I'm being shitty about one thing, so then fine, well, I'm going to be nasty about this too, and then it just feeds itself.
It starts with, finding something petty to be nasty about, or just being unintentionally hurtful because you have a bug up your ass about something. And then, well, if you're going to be like that, then I'm going to be like that. And then, at some point it's going to lead to an explosion.
Mutually assured destruction.
Yes.
Yes.
Except not really destruction, just, ugliness.
Yes.
And everybody does it. It's human nature. When somebody goes at you, whether they're supposed to or whether they're justified in it or not, when somebody goes at you to get defensive, that's just, fight or flight, and tell you that fight, especially when it's verbal and there's no real danger that you're gonna get knocked on your ass, fight is the way that everybody goes,
Yeah.
So I mean, communication is not easy.
No.
And I think the one thing that I have learned, and I keep finding timely things on Facebook for some reason. Like, I'm thinking about this and we're working on a podcast about it, and then something pops up in my timeline. Get out of my head. But I saw a cartoon the other day, about effective communication and conversation. Is having a conversation is supposed to be about learning, not about winning.
Right.
You're not supposed to be talking to somebody in order to win the conversation. You're supposed to be talking to them in order to educate them, and educate them in how you feel, and learn how they feel, and then come to a, mutual conclusion. It's not about, I won that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're having an argument or disagreement of some kind, you have to actually listen to what the other person's saying. Most people listen to respond, not to understand. And if you're not actively listening to what somebody is communicating to you, it's going to be very difficult to come to some resolution when you have a disagreement.
Right. You have to take the time, and actively listening means verifying your understanding as well.
Yeah.
So if somebody says, this thing made me feel like crap, you need to take the time to acknowledge that they're having a feeling and let them know that you hear that before then, responding that you didn't mean to make them feel that way. You have to acknowledge what is being said before you move on to the next
and that's
thing.
And that's something which is hard to do. You have to be very purposeful about doing that and how you're communicating your understanding back to someone.
Right. And very, very, you have to be patient, instead of, getting in there to get your next point out there. You have to be very patient and say, okay, stop, go back. This is what you're saying. Continue forward.
Yeah, because it's very, especially if you didn't mean to upset somebody, it's very easy to say, well, that's not what I meant. I didn't do that, and it can come across as negating their feelings rather than communicating that I understand you're upset, but I did not mean to do that.
Right.
And
I understand you're upset, and I did not mean to do that.
Right. Especially if you don't acknowledge that I understand the understanding, first of all. If you then move on to your next point, then they're like, you don't care about me at all. And so it's you have to be very purposeful in dealing with people when you're having a disagreement.
Right. And you have to take time to be intentional. You have to, even when you're having a reaction to something that somebody says, maybe somebody has said something to you that is really screwed up. And your first response is to be like, what the hell? Mm-hmm. You have to stop and take the time to assess what is being said. Did they mean it that way? Before you react. And it's not an easy thing to do. I don't do it. I'm supposed to do it. I don't always do it because it's human nature to just react.
When you're having an emotion,
but
it's difficult to overcome that.
But it's something that I need to work on, that effective communication requires that moment of stopping and thinking and making sure you're being very intentional in your communication, in your reaction, in your and in your, if you're the initiator, if you're not reacting to something somebody else said, if you're saying something and you're the first one talking, make sure that you're being intentional about what you're trying to say.
Right.
Make sure that you're not just saying something offhand. Make sure that you're thinking about how is this going to come across? How is this going to be received? Is there a different way that I need to frame this, you know, so that it's received the way I want it to be received?
Right.
And so communication is work.
It is.
You know, and it's a continual learning experience. Effective communication is a continual learning experience. And, you know, sometimes you think you have it down and you know exactly what you're trying to do, and it lands like a lead balloon, and then you have to reassess, you know, okay, where did I go wrong? And I think it's a commitment.
True.
You have to make a commitment to try to be a better communicator, a more effective communicator, to be a communicator at all in some cases, because some people, like, communicating anything is a difficult step, you know, but it's important for any relationship, for a marriage, for a work relationship, for a friendship, for a parent-child relationship, for your relationship with yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
My gosh. Another meme that I saw, you know, one of my friends posted that to assess how what your inner dialogue is like.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and if you imagine somebody speaking to you the way you speak to yourself in your head, and that person ends up knocked on their ass, you need to reassess what you're doing to yourself.
Exactly.
You know, so communicating effectively in your own head is important too.
And it's all of this. It takes practice. It takes time to learn. It's not something that happens overnight, but you have to just be mindful and really think about, you know, how you want to deal with other people, and how what you do and what you say is going to affect the relationships that you have.
Yeah. And you know what? Communication goes back to the good old golden rule. Mm-hmm. You know, do you want somebody to talk to you like that? No. Then don't be like that to other people.
Exactly.
Like, it can be pretty simple, but the implementation of that idea, not always so simple. Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, we'll put some resources that maybe we've found in the show notes. You know, it's something that we should all always be working to improve, you know.
We have to find some resources, because I'm really bad about remembering to do
I
that
have a
when I
couple.
post. Okay, good.
I'll make sure she does it.
Yeah, I was listening back at our podcast from last week. I was like, oh shit, I didn't put that in the show notes. I said I would, and I didn't. So I'll have to go back and fix it. But anyway.
But effective communication would have fixed that. I'm just saying. Mm-hmm. So anyway, this has been Communication 101.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us.
Yep. Now go out there and be somebody.
I hope you've got something out of it. If you have resources that you want to share, or want to share a story about, you know, your communication style, or, you know, something that you've learned, you know, please put it in the comments, contact us. You know, we welcome, you know, communication with you guys. Hello?
Hi, I'm still here. I was looking something up. I just wanted to communicate one thing.
Yes.
Which we don't necessarily do this for everybody, but we are really bad about checking our Patreon and communicating back with you guys. And I just want to say, Melissa McDougall, thank you for being our first patron.
Yay!
Yeah. And
we're so excited.
We'll reach out to her a little more personally, but thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay.
Okay.
So, I am Rachel.
And I'm Shannon.
And thank you for listening.
Exactly.
I was going to say see you next time, but there's this whole thing about you guys don't see us.
Yeah.
We don't see you.
If you're pressing your face against their window, maybe they might see you creeping outside their house. We've established this is what you do in your off time. But,
it's not what I... Effective communication. I need to be a little more intentional with what I'm saying. I am not a stalker. I'm not stalking any of you.
It's okay. Listen, just it's okay. Everything's fine.
All right. So we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you again for listening to Our Life in Transition.
This show is hosted by Rachel and Shannon McDill.
Our producer and editor is Shannon McDill.
Theme music is Seize the Day by Jens Kilsoft. Check him out at jens.kilsoft.net.
Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/olitpod. That's /OLITPOD.
Your support makes this show possible. Thank you.